An element that I fixed recently got me motivated to do a video on P2647 because the factory service repair manual is at best misleading and at worst wrong. If you follow it every step of the way, it can lead you down a path of trying to fix things that aren't broken, wasting your time, getting confused, and just so I'm going to go through the factory manual for P2647, show you what I mean, and show you where I believe somebody messed up. So, a brief rundown. Let me get my glasses. Honda's iVTEC on the K24A4. I'm showing you this on my 05LX. Yeah, this is the one with 577,000 miles, so I know it pretty well. The iVTEC. Focusing on P2647, we're focused on the VTEC oil pressure switch and the wiring that goes from the ECM PCM. I will just call it the ECM from now on because we don't care about powertrain, we just care about engine control module. The circuit coming from the ECM, the blue-black wire, goes to the VTEC pressure switch, and then the brown-yellow wire goes to ground. Simple circuit, as simple as it could be. The VTEC oil pressure switch at rest is a closed circuit, or on, according to most manuals or scan tools. When you get into VTEC and the ECM sends a signal to the solenoid valve to be on, it allows oil pressure through, and that oil pressure physically pushes the switch and pushes a mechanical switch open, breaking this circuit, and the ECM PCM can sense that the short to ground has now been broken, and it knows that there is oil pressure and it's happy. Here we go. Not now, cat. Not now. P2647 is when this circuit is permanently broken, meaning the ECM thinks that you're always in VTEC or that there is always oil pressure here. 2646 is the opposite. That's when the solenoid has been commanded on, but this circuit never breaks. It stays on. So on is P2646, off is P2647. There are three things that can break the circuit. If the blue-black wire loses continuity, if the VTEC pressure switch loses continuity, or if the brown-yellow wire loses continuity. Not much else to it. If any of those short to ground, you're going to have an on-on situation and cause P2646. 2647 is if any of this circuit is broken at all times, or intermittently. We'll get to that in a bit. Now, if you have fancy equipment like a Autel or HDS or whatever Snap-on scanner that can monitor live data, you can just look at a screen and watch it flip on off. If you don't, you can do the same thing. You can diagnose 2647 simply with an ohm meter and a couple little homemade things. On the troubleshooting for 2647, obviously check your oil level first. If it ain't good, fix it. Switch the car on, turn the key on, clear the codes, and then do a VTEC test and inspection with the HDS. If you don't have an HDS, all you got to do is just drive the car. Going through a drive cycle or so, getting it up to temperature, and driving it is going to allow the computer to go into VTech, tell whether it's happy or not, trip the trouble light, trip the check engine light, and give you codes or not. So if you've cleared the code, taken it for a drive, the code's going to come back. So the result will be no. Is the result okay? No, the engine light's back on. It's 2647, so go to step 5, because it is not okay. Check the result of step 4 is VTech switch failure, VTech switch open, VTech pressure switch failure, VTech switch open. I think those would be considered to be the same thing. If it's open, it's failed. Signal line open or ground line open. Signal line is the blue-black that goes to the ECM. Ground line is the brown-yellow that goes to ground, G101, right there. So the brown-yellow goes from the pressure switch through the wiring harness up to here, and eventually here. The blue-black wire goes from the pressure switch through the harness, down into the harness down there, follows the harness up through the firewall, and eventually behind the glove box to your ECM. Turn the flashlight on it. I've pushed some of the other wires out of the way. That second the second plug up from the bottom, the white plug, you can see in between the red and the brown, you see the blue wire with the black. That's the other end of the wire that goes directly to the VTech pressure switch. So if you have a short in either one of those wires, or the pressure switch has failed to where it shows a break in the circuit, you're going to get P2647. The way you're going to test this, you're going to start with removing the plug from the pressure switch. That is step 6. Turn the ignition off, disconnect the VTech oil pressure 2-pin connector. That is this connector. The blue-black is always on this side, the brown-yellow is always on this side. I have seen a pigtail been done where it got put on backwards. I don't know if that can cause a failure yet or not, but who knows. It wants you to check for continuity between the VTech oil pressure switch number 1 and number 2. That is probing those 2 wires, and this is a failed one. So if this one was bad, I would set this to ohms. Actually, let me do this. If I can prop this up right here, get my hands free. See if that's a good shot. Yeah, okay. So, pretending that this is the one that is down there, I'm going to put this on audible tone for continuity. So anytime, oops, oh, great, off, back on, thank you. Audible tone when there's continuity. So, the very first, step 8, they want you to test continuity here, and on this one there is no continuity because this is the broken one that I replaced the other day. I would have heard the audible tone if it was good. So that is step 8. Let's just assume I heard the audible ticking, and my pressure switch was good. So, is there continuity? Yes. Go to step 9. Step 9. Turn the ignition switch on. Measure voltage between the oil pressure switch 2-pin connector terminal 1 and body ground. The 2-pin terminal number 1 body ground is the wire you've already disconnected. Pay attention. This is the important part. Step 7, disconnect this connector. Step 10, measure voltage between terminal 1 and ground. That is the blue-black wire that goes to the ECM. So they're now, after disconnecting the connector, they're saying to turn the ignition on, measure voltage between the 2-pin terminal connector and body ground. So I made a little connector like this. I snipped off one of the ends so that I can insert it into the blue-black side. I'm going to point something out. This right here, wire side of female terminals. Technically what they mean by that is they want you to use a probe that actually pierces the cover and gets into the wire there. It's asking you to do the wire side of the female terminal. That's the female terminal. This is the wire side. That's what that means. But the reason for that is when you're testing electronic circuits, you're typically testing them with everything assembled, plugged in, and working, which is why they have those types of probes that can pierce wires. But keep in mind, in step 7, they said to disconnect the VTEC oil pressure switch. So I'm going to put this on ground. Got continuity to ground. And then I'm going to take, well, I've got to turn my ignition on. I can do that remotely. My ignition is now on. It said turn the ignition on, check for battery voltage. Switch this to DC volts. Keys on. I have battery voltage on the blue-black wire. Get my remote. Yeah, you can see that. I'm going to cycle key off, give it just a second. The ECM, now it's below a volt when the car's off. Turn the car on, back to battery voltage. Say hi, Phoenix.
Hi, Phoenix.
My problem with this is the way, hang on, let me show you something. Alright, so I just did what the book said. Turn key on, measure voltage from the blue-black to ground. Was there battery voltage? Yes, there was battery voltage. Repair the open in the wire between the VTEC oil pressure switch and G101. Because I found battery voltage here, they're telling me to repair the open. They think that there is an open or a short in this wire. So they're telling me that that test revealed that the other wire, brown yellow wire, is supposedly broken in between here and here. But here's the problem. Let me make sure the car is off. You have to do this test with the car off. Okay. Shut the car off. If you do this test with the car on, you're not going to get a proper reading because G101 shares a ground with all four of these devices. Sorry, three of these devices. Two of them are through this connector. The 24-bit junction connector is that thing right down there. You have to have the car off to do what I'm about to do, or you won't get a proper reading. So let's set this back up here. We're going to do continuity this time. I'm going to get my jumper wire and I'm going to put it on the brown yellow wire that goes to G101, and I'm going to test for continuity to G101. Do you hear that? I can get continuity to ground at G101. I've got continuity to ground at the battery. I got continuity at my ground over here. I got continuity at my ground over here. That wire, the brown yellow, after the book literally told me, because I had voltage at the blue black wire with the pressure switch connector unplugged, I had battery voltage. When the key is on, it's telling me to repair the open. It is not broken, it is not open. But if you follow this, you're going to take all that apart, because it's not telling you yet to test that wire to see if there's continuity. It's just telling you, you tested this for voltage, so fix this. The next one, measure voltage between the ECM and ground. The ECM PCM connector is the one behind the glove box where the other end of this wire goes. Is there battery voltage? You're gonna find battery voltage again, and it's going to tell you to repair the open in the wire going from the switch to the ECM PCM because you saw voltage here. Repair this wire, turn the key off, reconnect the VTEC oil pressure switch to B connector. Disconnect, reconnect. Nowhere in between does it ever tell you to reconnect the VTEC oil pressure switch. It tells you to disconnect it here, do all this crap, reconnect it at step 13. This is what's wrong, because I'm going to mimic the VTEC pressure switch fully functional by shoving the other end of my cheater wire and crossing the terminals of the pressure switch to mimic a working pressure switch that is completing the circuit. Get this on ground. What I'm doing now is going back to that step. Let's see if I've got this. Alright, I've got a good ground on my battery. I have turned the car on like it told me to do in step 9, right before I'm supposed to measure voltage on the blue-black wire. Now if I measure voltage on the blue-black wire, that was voltage. Key on with a correct working circuit. Because the circuit is complete to ground, you're not going to see battery voltage. If I turn the car off, no, that's right. hold this here. This is assuming the VTEC pressure switch is working. But because the book tells you to disconnect the VTEC pulse pressure switch in step 7, if I pull this out, that's doing the same thing. I have battery voltage. When the switch is plugged in, you will not see battery voltage. When the switch is unplugged, a correct circuit, you will always see battery voltage on the blue-black wire with the key on. That's where I believe the book is wrong. They don't tell you to plug the switch back in to your working pressure switch to test voltage, because an unplugged pressure switch, you're always going to see voltage on the blue-black wire, because the way VTEC works, as soon as you turn the key on, this wire is energized at 12 volts and shorted to ground so that the ECM can see that you are not in VTEC. And both step 10 with a yes is wrong, and step 11 and a yes is wrong, because it doesn't tell you to reconnect the pressure switch until step 13. Years ago, I fought with this so much and didn't realize what was happening, and it drove me absolutely crazy. So, to sum it up, basically, you can test for continuity from this to G101 or battery ground, just here to ground. That means that's fine. If you have continuity, you want to test for continuity across these. If there is no continuity, replace it. If there is continuity, it's either fine or intermittently working. And it might take a little bit of doing, but the blue-black wire that goes to the ECM PCM, if you have continuity on that wire, it's fine. There's 2 wires in a switch. If they all have continuity, you're good. If they all have continuity but you're still tripping P2647, it's an intermittent problem, which can happen and does happen quite often. The intermittent problems are more common with 2646, but that's for a whole nother video. 2646 takes specialized equipment. It's not really a shade tree thing or a voltmeter thing. You do have to have gauges and some sort of diagnostic computer, so that would be a whole nother ballgame. But I hope that that helps clear up what causes 2647, how to fix 2647, how to diagnose 2647, because it is really a super simple circuit. If you didn't have a scan tool to drive the car and monitor live data to see what the pressure switch is doing, when you are checking, when you're checking continuity on the blue-black wire, you can have your wire in here, have your wire back at the computer, have your audible going. If you hear your beep, then the blue-black wire at this end and that end, and you get your beep on your multimeter. You then can do the wiggle test of the wires, wiggle this wire around, follow it through the wire loom, wiggle this wire around, wiggle these wires that go towards the firewall, go up under your dashboard, wiggle the plug around, and try and listen if your continuity stops beeping. Same thing with the what color was it? The brown yellow. The brown yellow that goes to G101. You'd get your multimeter on there, set it to the audible for continuity, and test the ground wire that goes to G101, get it beeping, then start doing a wiggle test. Wiggle this wire loom, wiggle it here, wiggle it down here. It comes all the way down around your throttle body and all the way up here to the G101. So if the switch hasn't failed, but somewhere along here you either have a dirty ground, you got to clean this, or the wire got chewed by a mouse or a squirrel, something. You can wiggle the wires around to see if you lose continuity or not. If the wiring is good, if it passes a wiggle test, and you cannot get either of those wires to lose continuity, then the pressure switch is probably intermittent and will probably fail permanently eventually. But other than that, that's about it. Have a good one.